What is going on, guys? Stefan here with you, S&E's Garage. Today we are in the garage here with our 2007 Toyota Camry. Obviously you can see here the engine is in pieces. We have a block over here. We have a fresh machine shopped head over here, and we have some sorry pistons and rod bearings here. Now what we have here are the new updated pistons straight from Toyota. We have new connecting rod bearings, and we have the whole piston and ring kit as per the oil consumption TSB on this engine, and we are going to be rebuilding the engine today. We're starting the process of it. So in our previous video, I'll link it down below, you will have seen that we tore this engine completely down because in the video before that, we diagnosed it with a blown head gasket, and if you look at that video, you'll know the head gasket was blown right in between 2 and 3. You can actually see right there on the head gasket where it let go. So we got the head cleaned up, and we're going to be killing two birds with one stone here. We're going to be fixing the head gasket issue, and we're also going to be fixing the oil consumption issue. So with that being said, let's get you set up on the tripod. We're going to do a lot of time lapsing here. We're going to go ahead and install the pistons and rings. I'm going to show you how to do one rod piston ring bearing kit. Like, I'll show you how to do one of these, and then I'm just going to go ahead and start rocking and rolling on the rest. So you are going to need a piston ring compressor. This is the one that I went with. It is a Lyle 19500. This will work up to a 5-inch piston, and I believe these are 4.5 inches. Don't quote me. I looked it up when I ordered the part. I'm pretty sure that's what they are. But with that being said, let's go ahead and start wrenching. Now, like you saw in our previous video, you are going to have to figure out which pistons you have. So in our case, if you see here, you can hardly see it, but there is an A right in there. So in our case, we had one A, and then the rest of ours were B's. So what you'll see here, we have a B, an A, and a B. But I believe we actually needed to go like this because our A is right here, and then the rest are B's. This is number 1, 2, 3, and 4, and here is 1, 2, 3, and 4. So let's go ahead. We're gonna go ahead and remove these clips here. There's one on each side. I should only have to remove one of them, and then we can go ahead and slide this piston off. Now, one thing that I do want you to be aware of here is on the front of the piston, you're going to have a little dot. You can see it right there, and that is going to coincide with the front of the rod, which is this little notch right here is how you know where the front of the rod is. So our whole assembly is going to be pointing this way in that direction to our right, just like with this engine. If we're standing here, number 1 is on the right. All right, guys, so we have our brand new A piston out of the box and ready to go, because the first one that we are going to be doing here is an A. So we're just gonna go ahead, we're gonna take a 90-degree pick. You wanna be careful when you do this because these things like to fly out and go all kinds of crazy different directions. But what we need to do is go ahead and rotate this clip until it is in a spot that we can go ahead and get our 90-degree pick in there and pull it out. And at this point, we can now go ahead and take our thumb here and push this wrist pin out. Okay, and now we have our piston and our rod separated. Now we are going to be reusing this wrist pin, so we're gonna go ahead and clean it up. This piston is garbage, it's junk. Just gonna set it over there. Let's go ahead, get our new piston, get it ready to go, and then we can install it on the rod. Okay guys, so like I said, this notch here indicates the front of the engine, as does this dot here on the piston. So this is the way that it's going to go. But what we're going to do now is we're going to take our pins here. And we're going to set one into the piston as a stopper, more or less. And we're going to use that stopper, basically this pin or this clip here, so that we don't push the wrist pin all the way through the piston. So this pin is now installed into the channel. Again, front is going to sit just like that. I'm just going to go ahead and grab some oil here. Oil up our wrist pin. Okay, we're going to get it started like that. And again, we're just going to make sure that our notches are where they belong. Push it the rest of the way through. You'll see our piston moves nice and smoothly and freely. So now all we need to do is go ahead and install another one of those pins on this side of the wrist pin. Okay, like so. This piston is now installed. Again, dot, notch, notch. Let's go ahead, open up the rings, and let's get the rings set up. All right, guys, so what we went ahead and did here is we got our rings set up. We have compression number 1, compression number 2, and oil control, and we are now going to go ahead and begin setting them up on this piston. Okay, guys, so what we have here is we have our compression ring number 1, compression number 2, and our oil control. And we are going to start here with our oil control rings. You'll see I already have one of them in place. I was test fitting it off camera. So what you're going to want to do is on the oil control rings, there are paint marks, and the paint mark is going to be purple in my case. So you're going to want to put them purple marks off to the right if you're looking at the piston from the front, which this is. So if I just rotated this way, you'll see that our paint mark is on the right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab the spring of the oil control ring, and on this one you're going to want the white paint mark on the left, so the open end of the spring is going to point down. I would really like to thank the Car Care Nut channel for his video on doing this exact thing, because I could not find any information on this outside of his channel, so it was really a godsend here. But again, we want the white paint mark on the left on the bottom ringland. Okay, and now we can go ahead and slide the bottom oil control ring into place. Okay, now what you're going to want to do here is you're going to want to pay attention to where your ring gap is. So you'll see our ring gap is facing the front. So I'm going to go ahead, flip this around, and I'm going to put the second oil control ring, or the third oil control ring, on from this location so that our ring gap is staggered. Like so. So now if we just look for our ring gaps, we have one here at this side of the wrist pin and one here at this side of the wrist pin. All right, guys, now we have our compression ring number 2 here. Again, the mark is on the right of the piston, and there is some lettering. Ours just happens to say 2N on it, but that is going to go onto the second ringland. Like so. And again, we are paying attention to where we are putting this gap. This is going to be again on the front of the piston. So now we're going to flip it back around, and that's going to be where we put our number 1 compression ring. Now, unfortunately for me, I cannot find a paint mark on my number 1 compression rings, and there's supposed to be one. So I'm guessing maybe they changed manufacturers for these at some point, and maybe they're not directional anymore, because I've been looking all over for the past like 5 minutes, and I cannot find any paint marks whatsoever. So we're gonna go ahead and throw the #1 compression ring on, and then we're gonna go ahead and change our rod bearings. Okay, and again, we're just gonna make sure our ring gaps are staggered. There's one here and one here. So now we can go ahead, I'm just gonna flip this piston up like this, and we're gonna go ahead, pull our rod bolts off. Okay, we're gonna pop these bearings out. We're gonna see which ones are in this particular piston, or this particular rod. And we have 2s. So we're gonna go ahead, open our package here of rod bearings, and we're gonna slide some #2s in its place. Now I do just wanna take this time to show you what a new rod bearing looks like versus what our rather scored and dinged up rod bearings look like. Now these are directional. What you're going to see on both your rod cap and your rod is there is a little notch here. Okay, this is going to slide in like so, and you do not want to put any oil on the surface that is in between the bearing and the rod or the rod cap. You want that to be completely clean of oil. So we did go ahead and wipe that down, because if that was lubricated, it could potentially give your bearing a chance to spin. So what you're going to see now is we have some nice new rod bearings and new pistons set up on this rod. So now we're going to go ahead and set up our ring compressor, and we're going to drop this whole assembly here into the engine. So before we get too ahead of ourselves here, we do need to replace these piston jets. They are held in with a 5mm Allen key. So let's go ahead and get them off. Kaboom! All right, I'll go ahead and do the rest of these in a time lapse, and then we'll be back with you. All right, now we are going to go ahead and torque these down to 62 inch-pounds, which is not very tight at all, if you were curious. Okay, let's go ahead, flip her upside down, and get a piston in there. So before we grab this piston, you're going to want to make sure that the crank is at the bottom of its stroke, so bottom dead center. And I am just going to go ahead, wipe this bore out really quickly. Okay, and then we're just going to take some oil here, and I'm going to oil up the bore like so. All right, let's go get our piston set up in the compressor and pop it in. With any luck, your piston should fall right in. Okay, so what I just did is I pulled the piston down to the bottom of its stroke. I'm just gonna oil up this crank, slide this up. Going to go ahead and get our bearing cap here. We're gonna oil it up. Only goes on one way. and we're going to go ahead and tighten it to spec. All right, and now we are going to go ahead and tighten these to 18 foot-pounds, and then we're going to go ahead and do our 90-degree yield torque. This is kind of difficult with the camera where it is. Let me move you out of the way real quick. Okay. Okay, now what I want to do, I want to go ahead, put my crank pulley on the front of this motor. And that is exactly what we want. We want this to spin nice and smooth. All right, we're gonna call it a night. It's getting late here for us. We wanted to get one of these done, but when we get back with you, we're gonna go on a time lapse, set up the rest of the pistons, set up the rest of the rings, get this thing together. Alright guys, so that took a long time. I decided to come back out tonight and just get this done. what you're going to see here is we got our rotating assembly back together. We have our A piston where the A1 came from, and the rest of them are B's. You'll see all of our dots are facing the front of the engine, and if I flip the engine over, you'll see that all of the notches on the rod caps are also facing forward, and you'll see that this engine spins by hand extremely well. Now, what I do want to show you again really quickly, I just want to show you what these rod bearings look like here. They were pretty chewed up, but crank was fine. Like I said earlier in another, the previous video, I couldn't feel any of the scratches on there with my fingernail, so it was, the bearing did its job. It was the sacrificial metal, and everything's good. So now what we're going to go ahead and do another day, we're going to pull this cylinder head apart. We're going to lap all of the valves, and we are going to be replacing the valve guide seals. I do have them over here somewhere. Here we go, right here. We got some aftermarket, some Molly's intake and exhaust valve guide seals. So that's next. And then we can torque the head on. So stay tuned. All right, guys. So off camera, we went ahead and did a little bit of work with the cylinder head here. What we went ahead and did is we pulled all of our valves. So we have all of our intake valves in order from 1 to 8. And then we have all of our exhaust valves in order from 1 to 8. And what we are in the middle of doing now, I just kind of want to show you where we're at, is what we are going to do is we're going to lap some of these valves that are not sealing correctly. Now, if you look at our intake valves, they all have a beautiful sealing surface. So none of them really need to be lapped. But if you go ahead and look at our exhaust valves, you'll see that there's a lot of carbon and deposits and whatnot on there. And short of doing a complete rebuild of this cylinder head, which I feel is completely unnecessary, we're just going to go ahead and we're going to use a drill and a rubber hose and some lapping compound, and we're going to lap these valves in just in order to make sure that they seal correctly and the engine will, obviously run better and it will benefit from that. So being that I'm not going to do anything with the intake valves, so what we went ahead and did is we went ahead and removed the old valve guide seals. You'll see the guides have no seals on them. And we are going to install these Molly valve guide seals. Molly is an original equipment supplier for a lot of companies, and I have no problem at all running these. It did save us a little bit of money going this route rather than OEM, and I have a strange feeling that, if you look at the way this is constructed and the way this Molly is constructed, I have a strange feeling that these are actually original equipment. So what we're going to go ahead and do, I'm going to find a socket that's going to fit over these nice, and then we're just going to spray some silicone on top of each valve guide, and we're going to push these in by hand. You shouldn't need to use a hammer or anything. You should just be able to lube up the guide and slide them right on. right, guys, so what you just saw us do on that time lapse is we lapped one exhaust valve. Now, we are in no way seeking perfection here, because without a full rebuild, this head will never be perfect. But what I want you to look at is that is the seat that we lapped, and then compare it to one that we didn't, and you can just see just how much more uniform that seat looks. And you can also see the sealing surface on the valve, just how clean it looks compared to, say, this one that was not lapped. So we're just going to go ahead and do that on all of the rest of the exhaust valves, and we're going to do them to the seat that they go to. Once we're done there, we're going to install our valve guide seals on the exhaust side, and then we're going to put all of our valves and springs back in. Okay guys, what you're going to see here is we have all of our exhaust valves nice and lapped. You'll see the seating surface, or the valve seat, or the mating surface here, the face of the valve, and the seats are in nice shape now. Again, this is never going to be perfect, but if we did a leak down test, I'm willing to bet that there would not be any more than like 5% leak down with what we've done here, which is fantastic, especially considering that we're going to have brand new rings and everything. So I'm confident that this engine is going to run flawlessly. So what we're going to go ahead and do now is install our exhaust valve guide seals, and then we're going to slip our exhaust valves in. All right guys, so last night we went ahead and finished up our cylinder head here. All of our exhaust valves are installed. See, everything under there looks nice. So what we're going to go ahead and do now, we're going to throw you on a time lapse, and we're going to go ahead and install our cylinder head. Now, in order to install this cylinder head, we do have to make sure we go ahead and clean this whole mating surface. We don't want any oil whatsoever on this mating surface, so we're going to clean the deck of the block, and we're also going to clean the cylinder head with some brake clean and a paper towel just to get it nice and clean. And then we're going to go ahead, we got new head studs or head bolts. We're going to install our new head bolts, and then we're going to go ahead in the torque sequence and torque everything down. Now, they are going to get torqued to 52 foot-pounds, and then you're going to go around again and do 90-degree turns on all, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 head bolts. So we're going to go ahead, throw you in a time lapse, going to clean this off, slap the head gasket on, slap the head on, and we're going to start torquing away. guys, and what you basically just watched is you watched us put the cylinder head on, torque it to spec in our several passes, and then you saw us get the cams on. So the top of this engine is ready to go. So our next step, which is going to be tomorrow, I'm done for the night, is we need to flip this engine around, so bottoms up, and we need to go ahead and get the girdle on. We need to time the balance shaft and then get the oil pump on. That way we can put the oil pump chain and then the timing chain on. So that is going to be our next step. Stay tuned. We'll be back with you shortly. All right, guys. So where we last left off with this engine is we got the head on and we got the cams in. So we are now going to go ahead and install the lower oil pan and the balance shaft assembly. Now, there's a couple of things you need to do before you do this to ensure that this is timed correctly. If you look here at the balance shaft assembly, you'll see these two holes. They need to be at the bottom, and then there's going to be a circle there and a circle there, and those circles need to face each other. So this is timed, this is ready to go, and then you want your crank to be at top dead center. So you want this pin here to be at basically 6 o'clock. So we have this all set up, ready to go. So now we're gonna go ahead, we're going to take some brake clean and a paper towel, and we're going to very thoroughly clean this surface. We're going to clean this surface, and you'll see that we already went ahead and installed our new O-ring on the block because I did not want to forget that. So we're going to go ahead, throw you on a time lapse. We're going to get this all set up, and then we can go ahead and install the oil pump over there with a new gasket that we have, and then we can flip it over and install the timing chain. This is the pattern that they want the RTV installed on the upper oil pan. So we are just going to we are just going to make sure that we follow this pattern to a T. So let's go ahead. I'm going to set that RTV off camera, and then we'll go back on the time lapse, drop this on, and start installing it. Okay guys, and what you're gonna see here is we got the engine all timed up. Our two lobes on number one are facing away from each other. We have that timing mark lined up, that timing mark lined up. Down here on the crank, we have that timing mark lined up. And then on the oil pump, we have that, and then there's a timing mark back there. Take my word for it, it is lined up. And then our balance shaft, again, take my word for it, I already put the oil pump on, is in time, just the way that I showed you that it needs to be. So now we have our front cover over there in the parts washer just drip drying. We're going to bring it up over here. We're going to clean it up and get all of the parts washer juice off of it, and then we'll put some RTV on it. and slap it on. Okay guys, this is where we're gonna stop for the night. You'll see we went ahead, we got the timing cover on, we got the engine all timed up like I showed you. Oil pan is on down below, and we even set our tensioner up. So to set the tensioner up, it's super easy. You retract it, there's a little hook, you hook it onto the plunger, put everything in with your new gasket, and then you're gonna go ahead and spin the engine forward a hair, backwards, and then forwards again. And when you spin it forward, you hear click, click, click. You'll hear the tensioner ratchet out. And I just went ahead, I made a couple of revolutions. The engine spins nice and freely. I can hear when the valves open. You can hear puffs coming out of the individual cylinders. So everything is good there. The only thing that screwed me up here is, I guess when the machine shop set this head up in their jig, they pulled a stud out here and a stud out here. And I was going crazy thinking I was missing bolts. And then when I got over here, I saw I had 2 nuts left. So I do have to get some long nuts to go ahead, or long bolts rather, to go ahead and put through there. We'll worry about that tomorrow. And then tomorrow we'll get the valve cover on. And then we can really go ahead and start getting everything ready. We can put our thermostat in, we can put our dipstick tube in, and we can really, you know, get ready to get this thing back in the car. All right guys, so obviously a lot has changed here since our last filming for this video. I figured since we did a video on pulling the engine, you guys didn't need to see me putting it back in. We did all of the important stuff on camera. So the engine's back in the car. We do have to get it up over to the lift to do the finishing touches. I have to get the torque converter bolts and the bottom bell housing bolts in underneath the car, and we do have a new axle to put in it. But here's what we're going to do as far as the oil is concerned. So you're going to see 2 things here. A Fran filter, which if you know me from previous videos, I absolutely hate them. And then we have a Toyota filter. We have some 5W20 conventional and 5W20 synthetic. So here is what we are doing. Initially, we are going to fill with synthetic oil and the Fran filter. That is going to be what we are going to use to start this engine and to run it on the lift. This car is not going to leave this shop with that filter on it. That filter and that oil is just going to be the, like I said, for the initial start, to go ahead and flush any debris that may be left in the engine from the cleaning process and the rebuild, to get all that junk into the pan, into that filter. And then once we're done running it for probably about an hour or so, you know, we're gonna let it idle, it's gotta relearn everything. We're gonna dump this old oil out, we're gonna dump that filter, and we're gonna fill it up with some fully synthetic and a nice OE Toyota oil filter. So let's go ahead, let's get that oil in, let's get that filter on. The one thing that I am going to do is we're going to pre-fill this filter. So I'm going to fill it with oil. That way, when we do our initial start and our initial priming, the filter's already got oil in it and the engine does not start dry. This is paramount, especially because this engine was torn completely down. There's no residual oil in the galleys. There's no residual oil in the oil pump. It all needs to be primed, and filling that filter will give you that edge. So let's go ahead, fill the filter, get it in the car, dump the oil in. All right, oil's in, filter's on, pre-filled. So let us go ahead, let's finish up, let's get all our finishing touches done here. Let's get the axle in it. I'm gonna throw it up, like I said, on the lift. The next time we record, we're gonna show you the priming process and then the first start of this freshly rebuilt 2AZ-FE Toyota engine. Okay guys, this is the moment of truth. I don't know if you can hear it in my voice. I am super nervous here. I always get like this after I do an engine build or something like that. It's just, your nerves, you'll understand it if you do it. But we got everything done here. We got our coolant filled up. It's ready to burp. We just hooked up our battery. We got our new axle in. We got our belt on. And like we saw earlier, we went ahead and we filled the oil filter with oil so that when we go to prime it, it's that much, you know, it's going to prime that much faster. So what we're going to go ahead and do now is we're going to unplug the crank sensor and we're going to crank it. I'm going to crank it for like 5-10 seconds until I see that oil pressure light on the cluster go off. And then we'll come back out here and start it for real. Okay, oil pressure light is off. let's hope for the best here. Crack a door open. I'm just gonna let this thing relearn. It's a little noisy right now because we do have a leaky flex pipe that I do have to fix, but we're gonna get to that in a later video. All right, guys, so we let her sit and relearn and everything and, you know, kind of smooth out. And she's actually running fantastically. I'm still waiting for this coolant hose here to get up to temperature. I'm gonna wait for the cooling fans to cycle on. You'll see we get a bubble here and there of air coming out of the system. But let's just go ahead and take a look inside of the car. We'll see we have no check engine light on, and it seems extremely happy. It's idling right around 750 RPM, which is right where it belongs. And everything seems to be good with the world. So with that being said, this completes this video. Please like, share, and subscribe. Hopefully you guys enjoyed watching, and hopefully you learned something. I know I learned a little bit working on this car. I really like how these Toyotas are put together, and this is honestly the first Toyota engine that I've been that deep into, so it was a nice learning experience. But please like, share, subscribe. We'll see you guys next time. Stay tuned. We're gonna be welding a flex pipe into this thing and getting it ready to sell. We're gonna have to give it a really good deep cleaning. We got some little, you know, minuscule panels here to put back on, but all in all, this job is complete. So again, like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you all next time.